Thank you, and good evening to everybody who is on this call today with me. My name is Anuj Malhotra. I run the service lines and operations for the IBM Center in India. It basically means all the technology horizontals. The topic we are covering today is about digital transformation, and I will say it more like a story than about just technology. But one takeaway from this one image itself is interesting, right? I mean, you see a beautiful woman on the screen, and that smile is all about the experience of the coffee that she is drinking. It does not matter what technology was used to make that coffee, a DeLonghi machine, an espresso machine, doesn't matter, right? I mean, it just matters on the experience that she gets out of this. Digital transformation is something very similar. It's about using a plethora of technologies which are called digital, all to make a difference on the experience on the guy in the center here, which is your client or your customer. There are multiple descriptions people give on digital transformation. People talk about, using digital technology to, create new or modify existing business processes, business models, domains, different ways. But I think if you look at the end of it, it's about making a difference in the experience that you have today and making a difference in application of those technologies to business problems. And that's all there is to digital transformation. Let me try and walk through some of this through real examples in business, right? I mean, I think I'll try and bring it home with that, and then we can go from there and see if there are any questions that you guys have. I'll have two sections to my presentation. I will talk of examples of digital transformation, and I will also talk of possibilities for a country like India, where we can use digital transformation to make a difference, right? So let's talk about the examples first. Let's start with the first use case, right? This is about Walmart. Walmart has about 28,000 stores around North America, Canada. They store a lot of SKUs, stock keeping units, or items on their shelves, right? Including grocery items. Now imagine there is lettuce on the stores, or there's meat products on the store shelves, and there is either a E. coli breakout for lettuce, basically, that they're storing, or there's a breakout of salmonella in the meat products that are on the shelves, right? There are 28,000 stores filled with these products. And if you have to take a quick action to keep your customers safe, the only thing you can think about is saying, I have to take all the lettuce I have in my stores and throw it out, because I don't know which one came from which area. And if the outbreak of E. coli happened somewhere in California, which supplied me the lettuce through aggregation points, distribution channels, distribution centers that I have in Walmart, it's very difficult for me to figure out which packet came from California, which came from, say, Minnesota or some other locations. Likewise, meat products, right? They could come from anywhere in the world. And when you have a salmonella breakout and you have to save your customers from, say, chicken being infected with that, then you have to pretty much take your entire thing and trash it. And that's very expensive. That's also very unscientific. So there's a technology called blockchain. Most of you would have heard of it. There's a fabric called Hyperledger, which IBM had contributed to as well. That is nothing but a distributed ledger, which means the moment I start sourcing an item, somebody goes to a block in the distributed ledger and updates saying, I'm shipping a stock of 100 kgs of lettuce from California into, say, an aggregation center somewhere in, say, Atlanta. Now, when you start doing things like this, you can actually start tracking these blocks of, transactions securely, safely, in a permanent way, right? Which means tomorrow if there's an outbreak, I can trace it back to the origin of that source. So if I have 28,000 stores, and I know the outbreak was in California, I can look at saying, where did the California stock exactly go? And it's only those stores that I ask the store managers to take the lettuce out or the meat product out, either way, right? This is like the FedEx of food, right? Food. It's called the Food Trust. Walmart and 9 other companies, along with IBM, made it. The 9 other companies are who's who. This includes Nestle, Driscoll's, Tyson Foods, Unilever, Dole, Kroger's. All of these companies came together because they found it very, very important, saying, I need to use technology and blockchain, in this case, with a mobile app in the front, to try and be able to track every product that hits my shelves. And I should be able to do it real time, and I should be able to do it pointed to a specific set of stores or a specific store. Interesting example. Now, the blockchain has got many other examples where you can use this technology. Very in similar situations, some of you would have seen the movie the Blood Diamond, right? It was all about diamonds which are coming from conflict zones. So in the 1990s, there were conflicts happening in the western and the central part of Africa. If you look at Angola, you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, you look at Sierra Leone. There were large conflicts going on, which meant that while there was a government which was elected, there were militias which were controlling places within those countries where there was mining of diamonds happening, right? And the way they would do this is they would take the diamond which is mined, take it across the border, and sell it, and use that to rearm themselves and do whatever they were doing with the population, which was pretty atrocious, right? And in a diamond, once it gets to a kind of a processing zone and is cut, there's no way on earth you can figure out where the diamond came from, right? And this would go all the way to Antwerp. They would get, cut, sorted, sold, and that became a big problem. And there was this entire the United Nations got together and said, look, we can't be, buying diamonds which are coming from conflict zones. There has to be a way of tracking these diamonds, and we shouldn't be using them. I mean, there was a kind of an agreement put in place. They started something called the Kimberley process. And they said, we will track every diamond that's coming into our processing centers, and we will not take these diamonds which are coming from the conflict zones. Again, same technology, blockchain, a different use case. And there are lots of use cases like this of blockchain getting and doing and making a digital transformation for processes that exist in the real world which couldn't happen. And the blockchain, because it's a distributed ledger, it is also, it's got cryptographic algorithms. It's hack-proof. It's as secure as it can get. And I can track any transaction from the origin till the end safely with permissioned access. So it's an interesting technology, right? Let's go to the next example, right? What you see on the screen is the sensor that you see on the right-hand side. That's called, there's a brand called Guardian with Medtronics. This is a continuous glucose monitor or continuous glucose monitor. If you have a type 2 diabetes, it's a chronic disease. Lots of people around the world have it, which means many times during the day, you actually have to inject yourself with insulin, right? And because it's to be done multiple times during the day, you can't keep going back to a nursing station to say, I need an insulin injection and give me one, right? People do this themselves. And the catch is that if you're about 55 years old, you will live between 12 to 24 years, depending on where you are on your diabetes second stage, basically where you are, stage 2 diabetes. I think you have to get good at self-medication through those years to live a normal life, right? And what this device does is it's embedded in the interstitial areas of the tissue in the body. It's right next to the abdomen that you can see here. It is sensing the glucose levels in the blood sugar levels, or the glucose levels in the blood. And it is transmitting through that transmitter to the mobile application that you're seeing in the hand of this person. This application is called Sugar IQ. What it does is the glucose levels vary depending on what you're doing, right? If you're eating food, if you're exercising, you're stressing things out, that level will go up again, right? And then you need to take some intermediate actions to try and inject yourself with insulin to try and bring things back under control. And this technology that's been put together, all digital, is a sensor transmitting data to that mobile device, that taking it to a server at the back end, doing analytics to try and figure out your history of the movement of blood sugar, basically, on different activities, and telling you what is the dosage that you need to inject yourself with. Because it's self-injection, people have to be extremely careful. It could be life-threatening otherwise. It can also send alerts to doctors, to family members, so that they can intervene and try and address the situation if somebody's glucose level goes out of control. I have a colleague in IBM where he's got a 12-year-old daughter who unfortunately has a type 2 diabetes, and after this technology was used, I think for the first time she could do normal things in life. She could go for a sleepover with friends because the father knew that he had a way of tracking and had a way of intervention. So that's another interesting intervention example of using digital technology to try and make a difference in somebody's life. Let's go to the next case, right? This is Singapore Airlines, right? The most expensive commodity, or most expensive, I shouldn't call it commodity, the most expensive skill in our airline business is the pilot, right? And if that is the case, what do I want the pilots to be doing? I don't want them to be spending time, I want them to be spending time on a flight, flying a plane rather than doing other operational stuff, right? Typically, what a Singapore airline pilot does is he goes to the airport. The airline has an operations center in the airport, and you go in there and you start looking at your flight plans. These flight plans can be few hundred pages, detailed pages, and you go back and look at your flight plan and say, okay, is the flight plan okay? Where am I flying from to? What is the overall flight plan details? Which are the waypointers that I have to cross? How much fuel am I carrying? If I'm going from Bangalore to Calcutta, in case I'm unable to land in Calcutta, I need to have enough excess fuel to take me to a place like Bhubaneswar. So I look at, is there enough fuel being loaded? What is the overall weight of the aircraft with the luggage and the fuel I'm asking to be loaded? A lot of things have to be done, right? All of that typically is done through fairly manual systems and process, and it comes in a big fat bundle of flight plan. Every flight has that, right? We spent some time about 3-4 years ago with Singapore Airlines pilots. I was in Singapore at that time. We sat down with Singapore Airlines and their subsidiary companies, right, Silk Air and Scoot, and we asked the pilot what a day in his life looks like. Right from the time he wakes up in the morning, figures out which flight he's supposed to take. A taxi comes to pick him up. He gets to the airport, goes to the operations center, updates the flight plans as he needs to do, and then he of course consults his co-pilot. And then he goes to the flight, takes a flight, comes back, files the voyage report, and then alone can he leave home. And some of these tasks are operational in nature, which I don't want a high-paid pilot to be spending time on. I'd rather he be flying a plane. We developed this app. This had mobile front end. It had a lot of analytics behind it. It used the native features of an iOS device, which meant in the morning he would actually, starting from the morning, he would get a wake-up call on the day of his flight. He would know exactly who his co-pilot was, who his cabin crew was. He would be able to see the flight plan on the iPad right there, or during his ride to the taxi, on the taxi to the airport. He will know which taxi is going to pick him up. He will know which destination he's going to and what's the weather like, so that he packs correctly for that destination. And all of that thrown in, which made the time spent by a pilot and non-flying activities minimal. And that was the purpose of doing this, right? And it's fairly effective. And it's being used by about 2,600 pilots in Singapore Airlines today. Again, an application of digital technology, in this case mobile, I think developed on Swift. It's an iOS device, and hence it was developed with Swift. And then it was with a lot of analytics behind, which had all the data out there in terms of fuel weight and other stuff. And it also used the native features of communicating with other people. You could FaceTime, you could reference manuals, all of that through this device. Again, an example of digital transformation being applied to a real life situation, right? Let's look at the next one. This is United Airlines. I think their CEO had to go in front of the US Congress because they had some situations which were customer situations which weren't very pleasant. And he committed to the US Congress that they would make a difference in their customer interface, right? And when they got down to it, they made a big difference, believe me. We developed apps for them in different stages. You see the app on the left-hand side, those screens that you see. Different apps looking all the way from any incidents on the aircraft, any challenges on stuff. Is just the seats are not reclining, a particular monitor is not working, aircon unit is not working in a specific section, the lights are not working, all of that, and that would capture data real time on a flight and would be available to the engineering services when the flight landed, so that they could take corrective action on it. There were of course some sales apps as well that we developed for them. Again, mobile with analytics and connectivity to other apps which would try and tell the engineering staff what to expect when the aircraft gets in and what they need to go and correct in terms of seats, in terms of screens, whatever else, right? It's interesting. We did a lot of applications for this airline. We would take it as above the wing and below the wing, which was above the wing was all about sales and customer experience. Below the wing was all cargo and handling of cargo and a lot of stuff. Again, a lot of application of digital technology to make a difference in the way the processes are handled today, or the difference it makes to the customers, right? Let's move on from there to a different case. Kalyan Jewelers in India. I don't know how many of you know this family actually comes from Kumbakonam. Actually, those of you who have seen the Chennai Express movie will remember that city called Kumbakonam, from which this actually esteemed family came from. This is the Kalyanaraman family, which actually 100 years back shifted from that place to Thrissur, which is also called Trichur in those days. And they set up, they were actually into textile mills. Once the government took over the textile mills, they went into textile retailing. And then in 1993, they actually set up a jewelry store in Thrissur. One of the largest jewelry stores in those times anywhere in India, right? And that's how they started it. They had a very interesting model for selling. They had about 3,000 staff which would go out into the cities and visit people and sell at their doorstep. This was a store-to-door app that we built for them. The whole idea was that they would typically carry big manuals of jewelry where you could go back and look at what you want to buy. They would offer it to you on EMIs. They would take part payments. They would get the stock delivered to you, and they would collect your EMIs across the months. The only challenge was this was not all digital. This was very, very manual, right? And those manuals used to be big and huge to carry around, as you can imagine. Not great. I mean, if changes were made in the manual because of jewelry design changes, you had to print 3,000 of those and do a lot of that. The entire financial transactions were not very transparent. You didn't know when the EMI was collected and deposited in the head office, all of that, right? So we sat down with the Kalyan Raman management team and we built this solution for them. The whole idea was that now the store to doors, the salesmen come into the hubs, which is the stores, and they are given beats to go to, right? Which, and each one is assigned a particular beat. And because the iOS devices now have GPS, you can actually track the beat being completed, all the transactions being done. Jewelry designs are visible to clients on good 3D images on that, actually, that you can see when you're selling. So it made a very big difference to the way they were operating. It increased their growth manifold, as you can see on the slide here. And it made all the financial transactions fairly transparent for them. And at the central hub, you could know exactly what was happening on the field, both in terms of customer conversion and in terms of financial collections and sales and all of that in a jiffy, right? I mean, that was. We actually also did a pilot with another technology for them, where we actually took some AR, VR, and we allowed you to actually look at if you are a woman trying to buy a piece of jewelry, you could actually select that and look on the iPad and try and see how it look on you, right? And that's another a pilot that we ran. We didn't put into production yet, but that was another interesting application, saying not only can you get sales on the doorsteps of your customers, but you can also have them try the jewelry without having the physical jewelry with them, right? And that was an interesting piece of work that we did. A very interesting family. I think it's the next generation of Mr. T.S. Kalyan Raman, which is, I think, Rajesh Kalyan Raman and Ramesh Kalyan Raman, who were the people who were the visionaries around for this. Been a very, very successful application of digital technology to make a difference to their business and to the customer experience. Let's look at another one, and this is pretty interesting, right? Can you imagine that technology can help you design dresses and gowns and all of that? In 2016, there's something called Met Gala, which is actually a gala. It's a who's who of it turns out there. It's like the Oscar of fashion. It's only by invitation that you get there, and people, women specifically, are dressed absolutely beautifully. And they show up in this gala, right? This is for the Metropolitan Museum of Art for New York, the largest museum in North America, actually. They have something called a Costume Institute, and they host this event every year. And it's a big party. And what we did was we teamed up with a designer called Marsicha, who's from New York, and we worked with them, and we used IBM Watson, to try and look at Marsicha's ways of designing their clothes, and then scanning and devouring tons and tons of visual data, which is all kinds of style, fashion statements going around the world, to try and figure out what is the next trend coming and try to say what could a new design look like, right? Now, this was done by IBM Research, working with Marsicha and this lady, Carolina Kurakova, who actually got dressed in this as well. The costume also had lights in them, so you could, depending on the tweeting happening in the social media, the lights could actually change on you depending on how people are tweeting about you or talking about you, right? And it took into consideration Marsicha's own design methods and styles and also looked at what's happening in the market, right? This was 2016. You can find this on the web if you do Met Gala and IBM Watson. We stretched this further. We worked with a few more designers in the following year, which is 2017, where we did work with a few designers like Falguni and Shane Paycock, and then some in Australia as well, to try and look at saying, can we further this technology and design more stuff, more high-end designs of clothing, working with high-end designers, right? And this one that you see on the right-hand side, this is with Gaurav Gupta. This was a kind of a Vogue event actually, and what you see is Archie Punjabi who's wearing that dress, and this again was it was called a sari gown. It was designed. It was a hybrid design built, looking at again Gaurav's method of designing and looking at where the trends were going. The trends looks at things like, this is visual analytics, right? Looking at textures, colors, patterns, and all of that when they try and look at and shapes, and then trying to figure out what is the ideal shape to try and take out as the next happening thing, right? And this was designed there as well. This had lights too, and interestingly, again in this case, if there was a lot of tweet around lights and mood, the gown lights would change a bit. But this was a sari gown that we developed. Again, remember, we are not doing this to try and get better at designing gowns. What's the intent of this, right? This is like when you go to Formula One, you don't design technology in Formula One to, just win Formula Ones. You design it so you can take it to cars eventually. And that technology can be adopted to make a big difference in regular day-to-day cars, right? Look at this technology and look at its application again in a similar fashion, right? I can take this technology to a merchandiser in Walmart or Target, and he can look at what the fashion trends today are and what would people tomorrow in the next season be looking at in terms of buying: color, texture, patterns, styles, shapes, cuts, and forecast what the next generation of fashion would look like, so that you get ready for your next season, right? That's the kind of expansion of this that you should look at in terms of what is possible with this kind of technology, which is artificial intelligence, but applied to an interesting human situation and an interesting use case, right? Let's go to another one here now. This is Kroger. We were doing some work with this chain of stores in North America. And when we were doing this work, this is pre-COVID actually. And when we were doing this work, we were looking at saying, they had lots of call centers. There were lots of calls coming in there where people had to respond very quickly on what's happening to people's orders. And we were looking at saying, can we make that life a little easier? And then that's when COVID hit us, right? In a store where the sales would be 10-90, 10 online and 90 in a store, it pretty much flipped, like in the rest of the world, including India, right? It became 90 online and 10% in the stores. And when orders start going 90% online, then the call center is going to get freaking loaded, right? It's going to have lots of people calling in, checking on their orders, trying to see where the order is at, returns. And remember, this was in COVID times, so the call centers could not be manned either. This was not easy to man call centers in a COVID era, right? So we deployed some technology. The interesting part of the technology is, if somebody calls one of these call centers or a number of Kroger saying, if you need any queries on your shipment, can you just call us? That call actually goes to a computer, right? What the computer does is it just converts that voice call into text through natural language processing. It takes the text and tries to understand the intent through artificial intelligence, trying to understand what is the intent. If I got asked as a human saying, where is my order number so and so, which I had asked for a set of books to be delivered to me, as a human, I can understand the entire language and answer that very quickly. If it's a machine, machine needs to understand what a book means, what a order means, what is he asking actually. So there's AI and a lot of training of the AI engine, and then it understands the intent. So the voice to text to intent to running a bunch of APIs on the backend service, basically on the system of records, getting the answer, which comes back in a text, digital and then text, and then converting that to voice and answering the question on the phone, all in a matter of seconds, right? You can't take too much time. And the critical factor here was successful call resolution, right? If you have a customer who's called you and the computer is going around in circles, and then you pass it to a call center because the computer can't figure it out, you'll have a pretty pissed off customer, right? So you don't need that situation. And hence, a successful call resolution was the kind of metric that we had to work with. It was successfully deployed, very, very successfully working. And again, it's just a lot of technology taking what a human would be doing and improving customer experience and the speed. There were other issues as well, because if in the COVID times, if a lot of orders were coming around the items that people need during COVID and help, you can't be out of stock on those, and you can't do a lot of other stuff that you can do with analytics and AI using such engines basically further, right? I'll give you a parallel use case of the same thing in a different industry, right? For those of you who have ever worked in a medical setup, I mean, in North America, if there is the payer and provider concept, right? I am a person who's insured. The insurance company is the payer, and then there's a provider, which is a hospital system, right? So I'm the member. There's a payer and there's a provider, right? So typically, what will happen is, if I have a medical situation, I go to the closest hospital. The hospital looks at my insurance card, and then based on whatever my diagnosis is and whatever the procedure codes are for me to be done, as in like, what will they do? Will they do a hip replacement? Will they do a kind of a suture somewhere? Will they cut open and try and replace something? The hospital makes an assessment of, one, what is the diagnosis and what is the procedures to be followed and what is the procedure code. Now, just FYI, it's called ICD-10 codes, right? This is what the codes I'm referring to. It's called, there's an international classification of diseases, so that when two people talk about disease, they talk about the same thing when they refer to a specific code, right? There are 70,000 of those, right? Now imagine a hospital looks at the diagnosis, decides it has to do 5 procedures on you, right? And there are 70,000 of such procedure codes, which means there are 70,000 procedures they can do on you, and they're picking 5 that they want to do. They're going to call a call center and say, look, this is Anuj who's come for this is a diagnosis. These are 5 procedures we want to do. Is he covered? What's his copay? What is the limit to which you're willing to pay for this guy who's been insured? That manual, which is 70,000 codes, is about 1,000 pages. It's about 3.5 kilos, right? And imagine a call center gets a call and they're trying to figure out, saying, this procedure code, this employee who's covered by my insurance company, am I paying all? Am I paying some? What is his copay? What is the limit to what we can cover? Or is it not even covered, right? And that's a fairly tedious process, especially when you have 70,000 codes to figure out from. Now throw the same challenge that I showed you in the retail case into this, right? And same thing, right? Somebody is calling in, so far a call center which had a lot of people who are ICD-10 coders. By the way, it's a specialization in North America to be an ICD-10 coder. So somebody's calling that call center with lots of these guys, and they're going to figure out which one applies and how much is the coverage, right? Now just let a computer do the whole thing, right? A call comes in, there's a voice to text, conversion by natural language processing, the text to intent, saying what are the 4 procedures they talked about, what is the insurance card that was mentioned in the voice call, right? They will match the procedure codes and the insurance card coverage, send it back to run a set of APIs on the right hand side, send it back to the system records, come back with the answer, convert that back to legible English and text, convert that back to voice, and tell the person who called in saying it's covered or not covered. This is a lot of technology, and by the way, it works successfully. We have this in production, but interesting pieces of work that you can do where computers can do what humans can do as well, if not better, with lesser error, and applying all the digital technologies and artificial intelligence that's at your beck and call, right? So that's again another pretty interesting use case. So these were some use cases that I was referring to, saying you apply technology to make a big difference in a business process, in a customer experience, and the technologies vary, right? We at IBM, we have 39 practices, as I call it. These are horizontal technologies or processes. And when you have 39, that's a lot of technologies, right? And we can go deep into any one of these and keep going on for life, talking of use cases and stuff. But when a client comes to us, it's not about which technology. It's not about Salesforce.com. It is not about microservices. It's not about mobile. It's about application of these digital technologies into a kind of a customer situation like I talked about in the past, right? And that's what I think you in college should focus on, saying, look, I'm learning a lot of programming. I'm learning a lot of technology. How does it solve a business problem? And that's what you should look at, right? And that's what you will see as use cases that I've shown you now. But let's now go back and say, what can it mean for India, right? If I had kind of a blank whiteboard and I had to draw out what it could mean for India. Let's take 3 use cases and talk about what digital transformation could mean for India. Like, let's start with 3 of these, which is banking as a platform, a farming platform, and cognitive cities, right? 3 areas where digital transformation can make a big difference to India. Starting with banking as a platform, let's go ahead and talk about, right? I don't remember the last time I had been to a bank. It's been quite a while, actually. I mean, and, I remember we used to go there quite often to deposit money, get a draft, get a checkbook to pay checks to somebody. All that is passé, right? It's all gone digital. And if that's not going to happen with banks with lots of branches, what will those branches do, and what will this customer base do? And is that all the money you're going to make? Because as everything goes online, the margins of the banks are also going to keep getting depleting, right? But 1 or 2 things that are very, very good that the banks have is a customer base. If I take SBI, for example, its customer base is more than the population of North America, I think, right? I mean, so I'm just saying what they have is a customer base which trusts them with their life, pretty much, life's earnings for sure, right? And that's a big thing to have. Captive customer set which trusts you like nobody's business, right? It also has a lot of data on the buying patterns. What does the guy buy? What does he, transact in? How much does he spend? So the banks are now going to move away and say, look, I'm going to try and monetize everything I have. And I'm going to try and monetize the trust that I have, the customer has in me, basically, because of the great service I've been giving and the fact that I'm keeping his salary and income safe. And I will see what else can I do with it, right? So most banks are moving out. To the left bottom of this tripod, you can see is digital bank, which is very, very common. All of us in transact in digital bank. Moving from there to become a financial superstore, right? And that means that I can basically now say, I'm going to cross-sell you insurance. I will do wealth management for you. I can give you loans for reasonable EMIs. I can help with your stocks, basically, and all of that, right? So you go from being just a basic digital bank to becoming a financial superstore. And then you come to the right-hand bottom, you see the online marketplace, right? If you take the SBI's case, which is a phenomenal app, that's a marketplace, which means you can go buy, food, you can buy a movie ticket, you can buy a holiday, you can buy airline tickets. You can do all of that based on what the bank already has, right? It's got your account, it's got some people that it brings in who are partners to it, and those potential partners help set up a kind of an ecosystem of sorts. And remember, why is the banks doing this? Because all the money is going to flow through the bank, obviously, right? And that's the intent. Now, let me stretch this thought because this is pretty common, right? Nothing new. I mean, you've seen this happen today. I mean, let's stretch it a thin line further out, and I'll leave you with that thought. Think of what happens if a bank and say a postal service or a courier company gets together and say, look, I will give you a white label marketplace. I have a lot of small and medium businesses who are my customers as a bank. I will give them a storefront, right? A white label storefront. So if Anuj has got a retail shop, he can say Anuj's shop of whatever, books, right? And I will give a white label, which means I have all the technology behind it. All he needs to go and do is saying, put the banners, showcase his products, and he can do that, which means I will give him a marketplace. I will also give him a simplistic warehouse management system, which means he can manage his stocks and his finances and all of that with it, right? Now, what is this? This is nothing but federation of an equivalent of an Amazon. Remember, this is like I have a federated Amazon, but I'm a bank. I'm a bank and a courier company, and I will provide a federated Amazon. I'll create one. And that means what, right? That means that all the transactions that happen, because all the payment gateways are mine, the money is flowing through me, the working capital is being provided by me. And if I'm the courier company, all the shipments are going to happen with me as well, right? So you can actually now start moving to platforms versus just putting an online marketplace as in traditional way. You can start becoming a platform, and you can white label the platform so that your customers can be happy because they have storefronts. In the current COVID world, it's more relevant than ever, actually, right? People would love to do that. So that's where the banks are moving, and there are a lot of other things that are happening in banking, but this is an interesting place to go, right? I'm just saying, be a federated, kind of a storefront for all the SMB customers you have in your bank, and all the money still flows through you, right? Remember that. So that's one place where they're going, and this can really expand, and there are a lot of other use cases in banking or where this thing could go, right? Let's quickly go into a case of a farmer, right? Now, when you go to an Indian farmer, He obviously needs everything out here. If he's a farmer in the middle, he needs market access. He needs to be able to go and sell to traders or to government. He needs financial services. He needs insurance companies to insure his, his crop. He wants money from the banks for for making his working capital needs and buying seeds and fertilizers. He needs to go to the farm inputs guys and buy seeds and pesticides and fertilizers and all of it, right? Feed as well for the animals he has. He needs agronomic advice of what to plant, when to plant, why to plant. And he also wants farm management, which means if he's going to go and hire a tractor or lease a tractor or use other members of labor there, so he needs something of farm management. All this is required by the Indian farmer. But an Indian farmer on average in India has about 2.5 acres of land. That's all he has. And if you're planting, I think wheat or rice, you make about 30,000 rupees as a revenue on this, which is not a lot of money actually, right? So for an Indian farmer to do all of this himself is going to be a nightmare. One, because they're not educated enough possibly, and even if they're educated, they don't have enough wherewithal. Now, what happens if I make a digital marketplace for farmers, put farmers in the center of it, and make all the people who have to do anything with the farmer to come to the farmer through the platform? The retail of their stock, the utilities, which is all the bijli and stuff that they consume, transportation of their crop basically once it's harvested, all these stuff around banking, insurance, wholesale distributor, everything. I can make a platform where the farmer becomes the king, and people, because they need to do business with the farmer, will come to the platform rather than the farmer having to go to everybody, right? Below there, you're seeing lots of technology, and that doesn't matter. What matters is what you can do in terms of platform so that you get the intended outcomes which you've shown on the right-hand side. A critical place to go and would be great for the farming system. By the way, we are not the only ones talking about it. I think, Bank of Baroda actually has Baroda Kisan. It does a series of things that you can see on the screen out here. It does, of course, do the financial products at the bottom where you can see buying and selling journeys for financial products, more about their core business, but they also do with transaction and information availability to the farmers. That's what they've been trying basically. Doing this at an India scale for the farmers would be a great place to go, so that all the middlemen are eliminated. They get the best price for their produce, and they have everything that they need in terms of advice of what to plant, when to plant, what is the weather impact, all of that. I think that's an area to go, right? So that's another place that we can look at. And lastly, cognitive cities, right? The Prime Minister talked about 100 plus smart cities, right? How smart are the smart cities, right? And it's a question of what you can do. And this is now no news. I think the catch is this, right? Does the city understand the citizen, right? Does he have a 360-degree view of a citizen? I, as Anuj, does Bangalore norming is a way to look at it, right? And I don't believe they do, right? Despite the fact that they have my land records, they have my property tax payments, they've got my power supply payments that I make to them, water supply payments that I make to them, all kinds of stuff. They have all the data that they need, but they are not cognitive enough. Now imagine if you make that happen at the city level, not just in terms of understanding the individual, but also trying to see, put sensors around the city, not just for traffic, cameras for any incidents that may happen that you can track and, alert some systems back there. You can make a city cognitive, which means you can make a city get lots of data feeds, which it already has or can collect from sensors and services, and make a big difference to the life of its citizens, right? Which is the end outcome, experience, right? I keep talking about that. I think that's where we need to go with our cities, right? So that is another area. There's lots of concepts around it, from basic e-governance all the way to a cognitive government. Lots of articles about it as well. But if you look at application of technologies and making a difference to citizen services and to citizens, that's another case of saying I can use a lot of digital technology and artificial intelligence to make a big difference to how a government interfaces with the citizen, not the other way around, right? So that's just what I had for you guys today. Some examples of what's happening today and some examples of what's possible. So with that, I think I will give it back to you guys. So I'll go back and look if there are any questions that you have asked and try and answer them as well. And let me try and see what these questions say. Yeah, so I think I saw one question on application, and I think I did answer that. This question came to me at 6 p.m. What are the applications of digital technologies in agriculture, particularly small and marginal farmers? There are lots of technologies. We have some artificial technology engines as well. IBM has got something called Pairs Geoscope, which actually looks at what you're planting, when you're planting, and forecasting what you can do there basically. And there are lots of technologies. And again, like I said, I think the advantage would be putting this on a platform and putting this on a platform at a government level versus individual companies trying to do this, right? Could you explain? Very informative. Let me just see if I can make some of these questions out. Blockchain for supply chain management and its advantages. Again, like I said, blockchain has got many use cases. One of them is supply chain as well. I mean, a critical one of that, actually, in fact. We work with Maersk, which is a big shipping company that you would know. If I take blockchain, which is nothing but a distributed ledger of transactions, I put some sensors on the shipment. So if let's take a shipment of, say, oranges coming from some part of Africa or wherever else into, say, North America or, say, India, right? If I could put sensors on the container which is carrying them, which also means senses both of temperature, senses both of visual look at saying is the orange browning out or becoming too ripe. In the shipment that's coming, for example, say from Africa to India or Africa to North America, because I have real-time feeds available through sensors via blockchain, I can take decisions along the way saying I will transship, I will drop the shipment somewhere in North Africa itself and not try and take it all the way to North America because it will not survive the journey because there's a drop in temperature. There are lots of, supply chain is a great place to try and use blockchain, but don't use blockchain, only blockchain with sensors, with all kinds of other technologies. And lots of things that we can do in that area. Our digital transformation is really helpful in the medical stream and want it to be expensive. It's not expensive. Look at it from a medical situation, right? If a doctor is to look at your symptoms and try and figure out what's wrong or right with you, a doctor can base it on all the knowledge that he or she has, which is substantial, by the way. But it can't be as much as imagine a computer, gobbling up reams and reams of medical case history and looking at parallels to your situation against that case history, right? And they could do this at a global level, right? It doesn't have to be local there, right? So I think imagine doing that humanly, and you can't do it. There's no way you can have a human know such a vast repository of medical information, right? So when you look at digital transformation application to medicine, there are tremendous applications actually, and it can make a very, very big difference to the field of medicine and to saving lives actually, because you could get parallels of saying, for example, for cancer, right? If you have certain symptoms that you're showing, maybe there are parallels to that symptom that's happened somewhere in, if I'm in Bangalore, maybe it happened in Chennai or in Calcutta, or maybe even in South Africa or in North America, right? And there is no way a human can, in any way or form, keep track of that much information and make sense out of it. So I think there's a big application of digital technology and artificial intelligence onto medical data to try and come out with what we can do. It's interesting. You can use it in a lot of other things. I can use it in law, right? There's so many cases that are referred to when you're fighting a case. I can have reams of those cases fed into a machine which understands them and can give a guidance to a lawyer on what to do. Remember, in all of these cases, both in medicine and in law, they're not replacing the lawyer, they're not replacing the doctor. But they become tremendous support to both of these guys because they can spit out a lot of analysis and show to the doctor saying, these are 3 cases which were very similar. One happened in Chennai, one happened in Calcutta, one happened in Delhi, and they're very, very similar. And I think the treatment done was this, and this was the outcome. And the doctor can then make an informed decision. Likewise, in a lawyer's case. So you're not replacing humans, but you are giving them a muscle that they would not have but for technology. What is future importance of app development? Give me a few seconds. What is your view on impact of digital transformation on manual jobs that are being replaced by digital technologies? For some of those who lose their jobs due to job being replaced, application is much difficult to upskill themselves. So I think this is a reality, guys. Actually, if you go to the BPO industry, you will see it happening on the ground, right? Which means a lot of stuff that was typically done. I talked to the call center and replacing the call center agents. very, very common now. I mean, it's extremely common to do that now using technology, right? You go back to people doing process services. A lot of the stuff that they had to do repetitively, even despite a lot of knowledge that they had, that knowledge can be trained into a machine. So what needs to happen with these people is, and again, by the way, it's happening in coding as well. I mean, you have, engines available that can help you code much faster than you would typically do if you were starting from the scratch, right? I'm just saying this is the reality. It's happening. And, the one thing, and advice to you guys in colleges saying, look, the one thing I tell everybody who's trying to join us in IBM, and I'm sure so are other companies when they're taking staff, is saying that, look, by the time you pass out, the technology you learned would be passé, actually. I mean, pretty high chances, right? I mean, you would have learned some programming in your college, and by the time you come and hit the real world with us, that technology is gone and there's something else, because the technology is changing at a crazy pace, especially in computer engineering, right? And I think the one big thing you should remember is this ability to unlearn and learn, because that's going to be more important in your skill than the languages you learned in college. And when you come to us, when we assess you for hiring you, we look at your ability to learn and unlearn and relearn, right? And that we have to do it at every level, including my own, by the way. Right? In 30 years in the industry, I have gone through, I don't know how many jobs. I've changed job every 3 months. Every 3 years. Change jobs, change cities, sometimes countries, right? Every 3 to 4 years. Which means you have to get into that mode of saying, I understand computers are going to replace some of the manual job I'm doing. I'll do something more value added. And that's what it is. And by the way, I know of people who are very happy because computers are helping them do the manual work, because they can do value added work, which is more fun to do than the repetitive work that they're doing. But for you guys, it's a given, right? I mean, you have to get into that habit of saying, I can learn and unlearn anything very quickly with all the wherewithal I have. Then I shouldn't get worried about it, because technology is going to change and change very quickly on you. So there's one more question on saying, for example, on SBI, how do other holidays or movie tickets get connected to each other? Remember, all the SBI or any other engine will do is give you a storefront. There are APIs that can be going back into your base system and your transactions and pulling out relevant data. So what happens is there's a lot of customer data, for example, a bank will have, right? It knows that you spent on your credit card and you were in Mauritius last year and you were in Italy the year before that. So it knows that you travel a lot, right? That if it gives to a partner or works with a partner in the travel agency, that travel agency knows, look, I know that 20 guys out of the 100 guys that SBI has given me as options, basically, these 20 guys travel most. And these are the people I'll offer opportunities of travel to. So you can use data, but you'll have to then match offerings using artificial intelligence, looking at saying, what are the kind of holidays this guy is taking? What can I offer him? By the way, there's a lot of controls on the data. So it's not as if data is being pushed around everywhere. Lots of privacy controls, but even within those controls, there's enough place to play where you can make offerings which are very, very relevant to the customers of a bank. So I could just, I can offer him movie tickets, I can offer him holidays, I can offer him, shopping trips, basically, depending on his spend patterns and how much he spends. Also depending on the bank balance he keeps and if it's substantial enough, right? So that's one of the things that we should look at. Okay, so there's one interesting question. Wonderful presentation, one ethical question. Where do we draw the line between cognitive governance and citizens' privacy? A very, very important topic these days, right? And now the question is this, right? I want great service from my municipality in Bangalore or my municipal corporation in Bangalore. And if I want great service, I will have to let them access to some of my data, because otherwise they don't know me. I'm asking them to understand me as a customer, have a 360-degree view of me, right? That doesn't happen unless they look at my data. So now, if I am allowed to be the one who gives permission for access to some data, then I think privacy is controlled, which means I have the final say on my data and how it is shared. But this is not just here. When we talk of blockchain and other stuff, when I talked of, there are these blocks, there's permission information that can be made available to somebody. The whole idea is saying the permission of sharing of information, any information, medical, my history in the city or the state, long as I am the one who is authorizing that, I think that privacy is controlled. Otherwise, it can be a big ethical question, without doubt. right, on what people can do with data. A lot of people are, and look, I am a little more liberal on this. I know a lot of people are extremely touchy on saying, when I put in my facial recognition on my phone, where is data going? Is it residing on the edge? Is it going to somebody in some central place? My thumb imprint's going somewhere. All of that, right? So I think we can let fear overtake us and get too worried about it. As long as you have control on your data and you are giving permission to somebody, I think a part of the ethical privacy question is addressed. Not all of it, by the way, because in some cases you don't know well enough of what the data could be used for. So it's up to also the person who's asking for access to your data to ask for permission, explaining what the exact usage of that data will be. Very, very critically, when you give authorization to somebody to access your data, please read the fine print and see what will the data be used for. And if they don't tell you, then be very careful on how you give access, right? So it's up to also the person asking for the data to explain what the data will be used for, what are the limitations and boundary conditions around it, and then you can give them access to it. Yeah, but there's a lot of debate on this, on the ethical question of, who can get my data, what can they do with it, and all of that. And it's not an easy answer in all cases. It's a case by case answer. Practical difficulties and safety measures and digital transformation, none, if you ask me. Actually, I'm just saying. I think it is your ability to apply technology to get someplace better. So there's no risk to you, no worries for you. As long as you address the privacy question that PK asked me in the previous question, I think as you're doing that, there's no risk actually. There's only upsides. I think in every use case that I talked about, from the airline to the retail store to the medical stores to food trust, to what we should do in our own industries, I think it only gets to you a much better place than you are today. And I don't see any challenge in that data being, and digital transformation coming in and impacting me in any way negative. I only see upsides, right? And I think that's what it is. So I think I've answered the questions that made sense to me on this list. If there are any more questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, to the moderator, I will hand the session back to you. I think I'm getting no more questions. So the moderator, can you take the control of the session, please?